Hello and welcome to Conway's Kitchen. It's a finger lick and it's an easy way to cook. What is up, y'all? Welcome to Conway's Kitchen. Today I want to make a mushroom gravy and potato breakfast. I used to be pretty afraid of gravies and cooking with flour generally, but after, stepping my toes in the water, I got pretty comfortable with this gravy, and then with that, I was able to modify it to make like a cheese sauce for nachos, or like an alfredo sauce for pasta. It's just kind of an easy way to get like a thick, creamy sauce going, and we're just gonna top it on some potatoes, add some fried eggs, boom, breakfast. Let's check it out. Alright, to start off, we got a skillet here for the potatoes. I want to cut them down cut them down so they're really small, and then I want them to fry up real well. And I have found that using less oil is going to be better to get those potatoes crispy. I used to think that more oil would make them crispier, but in fact using a little bit less oil will allow you to get them crispy. So a little bit of oil there, and then we're going to rinse and cut some potatoes. Alright, potatoes are rinsed and peeled. We have a wet paper towel underneath the cutting board, keep it safe. Potato here, basically, this is sort of the long flat side. You want to kind of find the skinnier axis here and cut it in half, so you have two pretty even halves there. And you want to make the pieces small but not too small. So we're going to do 2 cuts there, and then turn it sideways, and probably just another 2 cuts. And then you're kind of left with these pieces that are going to be, about yay size is what we're going for. So again, just 1, 2, turn it sideways, 1, 2. So some of these pieces are going to be a little bit bigger. Could potentially cut those in half if you wanted, but I think they should be fine. Ultimately, I usually like to cook potatoes in like very big chunks, but I kind of like the sort of hash brownie vibe that we get from like cutting them small and using them in the skillet with a little bit of oil. So that's what we're doing today. And basically, once the skillet heats up, we're just going to add it there, a little salt and pepper, and then we're going to cut down the mushrooms. Mushrooms here, we are just using these like basic white mushrooms. If you're making a mushroom gravy, if you have the means, probably something like a shiitake or a portobello is going to be the more ideal mushroom to use, just because it sort of has more of the like mushroomy flavor of it all. So when you make a gravy, you're diluting it with a lot of like milk or alternative milk, and so you need a lot of mushroom flavor to cut through all of that. So using a more mushroomy mushroom like a portobello or a shiitake might be a little more ideal. But we're just going to roll with this because this is what we got. Stems, just cutting off like little discs there, and then the top part of it, like 3 or 4 slices. Like something where they're not super thin, but they're not too thick either. Alright, and those are cut. The skillet's on. Basically, we can turn the burner on for these mushrooms. Gonna do about medium heat. Even if the gravy sort of finishes before the potatoes do, that's okay, because you can sort of just put the gravy on low heat and let it kind of just sit there until the rest of your stuff is ready. Ooh, also, very important, butter. We got about 2 tablespoons of butter in there. Butter is going to be really nice for the gravy, the flavor of the mushrooms, the texture of the mushrooms, all that stuff. If you're not opposed to butter, would highly recommend using butter in this situation here. Last thing we need to cut, I need to cut some cheese because I don't have a cheese grater. I don't think cheese is like the most traditional thing to add to gravies, but this is oat milk. This kind of makes it a little bit more flavorful, a little bit, texture-wise, a little more cohesive. I'm gonna add just a little bit of cheese. I would say if you were like trying to make like an alfredo-y sauce out of this, or like a cheese sauce for nachos or something, you could sort of do the same process, a little less milk and like way more cheese. So it's sort of just like the ratio you're going for. Gravy, it's gonna be mostly this with just a little bit of cheese today. butter's hot, so we're gonna add these mushrooms in here. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pep. Actually, no. Yeah. A little salt, a little pepper. Give that a good mix around, and then pretty key for this is gonna be having a lid, just so you can keep all the mushroom juices there. So we can have the lid here. Potatoes, since we're trying to like brown them and get them kind of crispy, you don't want to like flip them over too many times. You kind of want to let them just like cook down and then get all crispy on that side and then try and flip them over for there. You can give them a little shake from time to time if you need, but I'm not going to quite like go in with my spatula and like start flipping them over too much. And you can see there's a couple little pieces here that already have little brown stuff on them. So far so good. Getting a little crispy, running out of oil at the bottom, which ultimately is kind of what we want, and why I like using a skillet for this, because if you're using like a non-stick pan and you run out of like, you know, your fat at the bottom, oil, butter, whatever it is, you're gonna kind of start ruining your pan a little bit. But the skillets, you can kind of cook on them a little bit rougher, and they still maintain their integrity. So oil's running out, which means those potatoes will start crisping up pretty soon. And with the mushrooms, kind of just keeping an eye, stirring them every couple minutes or so. You don't want to stir them too much and get too much of the liquid out of the pan. Mushrooms, we got a lot of liquid at the bottom, looking good. You can give them a little stir if you really need, but they probably won't really brown down or anything like that right now. And basically you're just going to kind of keep cooking them until most of that liquid is gone. Crispy. We're getting there. This is what we want. Nice and crispy potatoes. Potatoes. Might be a little hard to see, but there's very little oil in the bottom of this pan, which is good. It'll help the potatoes get crispy, but you do definitely want to keep an eye on them. The other day, I was cooking a similar thing. I kind of looked away for too long. I came back and my potatoes were a little burned. So just make sure you're moving them around just so they don't get sort of the black part. You know, brown and crispy, good. Black and crispy, not so good. Alright, so basically all of the liquid, there's still a tiny bit left, which I found with the flour makes it easier. I have a spoonful of flour here. Basically what you want to try and do is add just a little bit at a time and stir it around as you're adding it. I used to sort of just like dump it all in and try and stir it around real fast, and it would get all clumpy, and that's what made me kind of like wary about like using flour for cooking, because it just like it seemed like it just wasn't working out the way it was sort of theoretically supposed to. So just adding a little bit and stirring it around as you need will help it just from being all clumpy and weird. A little tedious, but now there's no big clumps of flour in there, which is nice. And the exact amount, I don't really know. I don't really know how much flour you're supposed to have. But I found a spoonful usually takes care of everything I want it to. Oh. And so, yeah, just keep stirring it. And with this, actually, you can cook it down for a couple minutes. This was sort of the other thing that when I would dump the flour in and there are these big clumps of flour, I would try and like add the liquid right away because I just thought like, oh, I gotta fix the problem that I just created. But now that there's not big chunks of flour here, I don't quite have to worry about hitting it with the liquid right away, and I can cook this down for a hot second. And I'm not a big food science person, but I'd imagine it has something to do with gluten and activating certain things in flour itself, which will lead to like more, you know, saucy gravy as opposed to something that's going to be super liquidy. It'll help it kind of all come together. Best guess.
Gluten.
Oh yeah. Ooh, get that potato. Yeah. So yeah, just a couple minutes. The recipe I initially knocked off said 5 minutes. That always seemed kind of like a lot of time to cook down the flour. I don't know. Again, pretty amateur channel happening right here. Could have done some research. But I didn't. Alright, cool. That's been cooking for, I don't know, a minute or two so far. I think now is a good time to add the liquid. Similar to the flour, you know, add some, and then you want to stir it around real good because you want that flour to kind of disperse throughout and all that stuff. What you can also do here is crank that heat up, not to like super high heat, but turn it up a little bit on your dials, and that'll sort of just, it's cold milk I just added. And this is actually just oat milk, so you don't even have to use like actual milk to get like a thick creamy sauce. You can do it without. So it's almost vegan, but the butter is pretty crucial. Sorry, cows. So yeah, just keep stirring it. It's gonna seem like too liquidy, and then all of a sudden it'll just like come together like that. So just keep giving it a stir. And also what you can do at this point is add some seasoning. So, I'm actually gonna add a tiny bit more. Seasoning wise, thyme. Oh no! Do I have enough in thyme? Did I use the last of it? There you are. Alright. Thyme. A good amount. The other day I thought I dropped in like way too much, but it ended up not being way too much. So you can add a good amount of thyme here. You could use fresh garlic powder. Works pretty similarly. A good amount there. And lastly, salt and pepper. A little bit of salt, a lot of pepper. And once you bring this up to a boil and it starts coming together, definitely retry it, see how the seasonings are tasting. Maybe you want to add some stuff, but give it a moment to sort of cook down, come together, thicken up, and then you can give it a try. But yeah, it's an interesting process because it seems too liquidy, and a lot of the times it seems like, oh, I messed this up, you know, I did something I wasn't supposed to, but it'll come together. And then basically once it thickens up, that's sort of when we add the cheese as sort of an afterthought, just to kind of add a little bit of flavor and just kind of make it even creamier. Potatoes here looking nice and crispy. Feel free to try them, make sure they're where you want, but you can just turn it down to low heat and those will stay hot. With the gravy, we got a little bit of bubbles happening. Make sure you keep stirring that from time to time, and pretty soon here it'll start to thicken up. It is starting to thicken. Because you can see when you like move it, it's like, looks more like there's a mass moving inside the liquid. So it's getting there. If you find it's not thickening up, maybe just leave it alone, don't stir it for a second, and just sort of let it do its thing. Turning that heat down a little bit. Now that it's already sort of hot and boiling, you don't need to keep it on too high of a heat. It'll still stay hot, so it's still on medium.
We use a lot of heavy cream at work. It's pretty disgusting, especially when you open a fresh gallon of it.
Dude, I mean, but that's everywhere, dude. Like restaurants and stuff. Like that's why shit tastes so good is like they don't use milk, they use heavy cream. Like, oh, I'm not gonna use a little bit of butter, I'm gonna use a bunch of butter. And then you get it served and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is so good. And you're like, yeah, it's also really unhealthy.
Like that cream of butter soup from your work. I love it.
Oh, that's mostly heavy cream. It's like, yeah. Heavy cream, butter, and whatever like scraps of vegetables are around, mushrooms or squashes or whatever. All right, we have reached the point where it's starting to thicken up real good. Gonna add that little bit of cheese soon. We're doing the breakfast style today, so gonna put the oil on for the eggs. Could also be good as like a dinner dish, maybe with some like steamed broccoli or something like that. You could also probably just use sausage instead of mushrooms if you don't like mushrooms. I believe the process is pretty similar for a sausage gravy. Almost there. Let it thicken up a little bit more, and then I'll try it and see if we need to change anything. It's getting pretty thick. While that water is cooked off, try some of it. Should be pretty herby, a little peppery, a little creamy, and a lot of mushroomy. Seems good. Seems balanced. It is at this point. I'm gonna add the cheese and just add a little more flavor and creaminess to all of it. Pretty optional, pretty non-traditional gravy status here, but if you've watched any of my videos before, you've probably noticed some habits of mine. I'm a very habitual person, and adding cheese to my food is one of them. And potatoes are going in a bowl, eggs cooked down, and your meal is ready. We're just gonna throw this lid on, trap that heat, start plating. Got the cheese nice and melted in here. Some nice cheesy gravy on top of your potatoes. A little smoked paprika will be nice with this. Fried egg. There you go. Potatoes, mushroom gravy, a little fried egg with it. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.